cactus and succulent growers, it's Lynn. And in today's video, I'm going to be showing you how you can prune and take cuttings and propagate Kalanchoe fedtschenkoi, also known as lavender scallops. And this lovely succulent is a very beautiful succulent, but it's one that you do have to prune back literally every year because it grows very lanky and can take over. I'll just show you here. This is how the mature growth grows, and all these sort of lower leaves fall off, and then you're left with a lot of sort of a bit of an ugly looking plant that is otherwise beautiful. So every year I like to take cuttings of this, give it a good prune, and then propagate the cuttings. Very, very easy to do. Now, I've made a few videos on how to propagate different types of kalanchoes on my YouTube channel, and do check them out. I'll link a video up above to a video I made on how to propagate Kalanchoe blossfeldiana, which is a very popular houseplant, and I also share lots of tips on there on how to do it. So I'll link that video also down below in the video description and at the end screen of this video as well. But with the fedtschenkoi, Kalanchoe fedtschenkoi, what a tongue twister. It's part of the Bryophyllum family, and what that means is they produce these tiny little plantlets, as you can see here, little babies that grow along the edges of their leaves. And these can be picked off, placed on top of soil, and they propagate really easy like that. The most common type of Bryophyllum will be the mother of thousands plant, Kalanchoe degremontiana or Kalanchoe tubiflora. Very popular house plant as well, and I've also made videos on propagating them, so I'll link all them down below in the video description. So this one can be propagated literally by taking off the little plantlets on the edges of the leaves, placing on the soil, keeping the soil a little bit moist, and they grow very fast. However, this is going to be a pruning and propagating from the prunings. Now, there's two ways of propagating these from cuttings. And one is to literally take the cuttings, which I'm going to show you now, and place directly in water, and then keep them in a bright but position away from direct sun for a few weeks until they form roots. And they will root, in my experience, very easy this way. Once they've rooted, I then will pop them up as normal, and then I just again prune them as and when they need every year. And they're great to give away to friends as well, gifts. But also the other way is you can take cuttings directly, and also you can put them directly into the soil as well. Now, if you're doing that, I recommend it's best to let them callus over for a couple of days just to allow the cut part to dry. But I'll explain that now in this video. So first of all, this is my old Kalanchoe fedtschenkoi. Had this for a number of years. This was one that I got cuttings from one of the growers at the botanical gardens here in Belfast. They have one of these plants, and the guy very kindly gave me some cuttings at the time, and it has grown remarkable. But as he said to me, you do have to prune it back regularly because it can grow very unsightly. Now, depending on how large your plant is, this one is a very large, very much needing a good prune. So I'm going to cut it right back, and I won't bother keeping the lower part of it. If I cut it right back, the lower part can repropagate, but it's very messy, very old and woody. So I'm going to be propagating all these fresh parts. So what you want to make sure you do is have at least 2 inches of the actual stem when you take a cutting. For example, this one here. So you also want to make sure that you cut just below a node, because if you cut halfway through like that, it's not going to root in the middle part. Roots come out just below and around the node, which is the very lower part just below. So here we go, at least 2 inches, and I'm going to cut here, then just below the node. As you can see, there we go, just below the node. So that's the first cutting taken. I'm going to do a few more, show you a few examples in here, and show you what it looks like when I've taken a few. So here we go, there's another one there, and then again at least 2 inches and just below a node there. Again, I'll show you here, at least 2 inches there, just below a node. Now what you want to do when you're taking the cuttings, you want to make sure that any sort of very lower leaves are removed, because if I was just to put this straight into water or into the soil in the pot, the nodes, where the nodes are here, that's where the roots are going to come from. So if there's sort of leaves in the pot or in the water, they can rot and it's prevent the rooting. So you want to remove these, just gently pinch them out, just so you have at least an inch free there for the rooting. And these are just sort of like aerial roots that come off here. That's why it's so easy to propagate. I'm actually going to cut these off because I'm going to be putting it into the water, but you don't have to have these on. Obviously I prune them off. And the same if you've got any old flowers as well hanging on when you're taking the cuttings, that such as this. That's what the flowers look like. They're lovely sort of orange flowers as well. But prune any flowers off. I wouldn't recommend taking cuttings when it's flowering anyway. I'd wait till it's the end of the flowering, as in the case with this one here. It has been blooming lovely. Flowers are gone, so it's a perfect time to give it a good pruning. So I'm going to carry on taking cuttings from this big plant here, and rather than bore you all with a long video of me doing it, I've shown you sort of how to take the cuttings, and I'm going to show you what it looks like when it's all pruned back. Now that's all the prunings I've taken here from the main mother plant. There's a lot of cuttings, and this is the old mother plant, and as I mentioned, you can, if you wanted to, you can cut it right back to about an inch or so from the base, and it will send all the new growth, such as what's happening here. When I cut it back last year, this is sort of all the new growth. However, it's woody and it's unsightly, and because it does propagate so easy from the fresh top cuttings, I'm going to dispose of this plant and repropagate all of these cuttings here. So I'm going to show you the two ways now on how you can do it. Now, as I mentioned, you can either put them directly into the water to root, which is a method I prefer to do because you can see the roots, and I find it's faster as well to do it like that. Or you can put them into the soil. Now if you're putting them into the soil, it's really important that you let the cut end here callus for at least a day or two, because if I was to put that, say remove these leaves now, put that straight into the soil, it can rot, and in my experience, it's just better for me to use the water. But if you wanted to put them directly into soil, you can do. Just let it dry for about 24 hours, a day or two, before putting it directly into soil. So if you put it into the soil, obviously, first of all, you want to make sure you remove any lower leaves. And as I mentioned, these little plantlets can also just be placed on top of the soil as well. So remove the lower leaves, like so. You can pinch them out. And then I'm going to set that aside for 24 hours just to let it dry before potting it into the soil. Now the water method is very easy. It's literally just, as I mentioned, make sure any lower leaves are removed there, and you've cut just below a node. And you're better off putting it into the water pretty much as soon as you cut it, because also it roots better. And the reason why it doesn't really rot in the water is because the water itself doesn't really have the fungus and things like that soil can contain, and as long as you change the water every 2 to 3 days, then it should be absolutely fine. You just literally place it in there. You want to make sure that at least the first 2 nodes are covered with the water, so place it in there. And the same here with this one, again place it in there. And this is just great because there's no waiting around, having to wait for things to dry. Just put them straight in. And as I say, they'll root literally within a couple of weeks or so, especially if you're doing this in the spring and summer. And I mentioned remove any type of roots that's coming off there because you don't need them. And, straight in. Now if you put them into soil, as I mentioned, leave it for at least 24 hours, and you want to make sure, as you can see here, I've left this for a day and it's formed a dry sort of callus, as they call it there. And I do know people who just cut them directly and put them straight into soil. It does depend also on your climate. I'm here in Ireland where the humidity is quite high even in summer, so I don't like to just put them straight in, but I like to let them dry. And as you can see there's no dampness there, and it's formed a little tiny skin. And then all you literally have to do is literally just place it in. You want to make sure, as I say, the first 2 nodes are covered like that, and then just gently press down. Very easy peasy. And you can put 3 or 4 into a pot as well. It looks so much tidier than that messy plant I had earlier. That's so easy. And then what I recommend you do as well, it doesn't have roots. So if I was to water this, it's not going to take up water. But at the same time, because it doesn't have roots, if it's just put back into a sunny position in my greenhouse, for example, it can dehydrate quite quick before it has a chance to develop roots. So what I like to do is I just like to spray very lightly with a bit of water from a sprayer just around the very base of the cuttings, and this will also help to encourage rooting. Do keep the cuttings in a bright position but away from heat and direct sun just until they've rooted, and you'll know when they've rooted because if you gently go to touch the cuttings, they'll have a firmness about them. You also see signs of new growth coming from them as well, and cuttings can take a couple of months or so before they can really root. And once they're fully rooted and once they've rooted, I should say, and they've got signs of new growth, that's when you can reintroduce it into a more sunnier position. So for now, I'm going to be putting this aside and putting this under the table in my greenhouse. So it gets plenty of light, but it's also got a bit more shelter and away from direct sun and heat to root. And as I say, with the cuttings in the water, they will take a couple of weeks, I would say, at least. It usually takes 2 weeks for me, depending on when you're taking the cuttings. It's summer now, so these will root quite quick. Once they've rooted, I just then pop them up into the soil, as I mentioned there, and do change the water every 2 to 3 days. So I hope you found that video useful, guys, so you know how to prune back an unruly Kalanchoe fedtschenkoi. And I always prefer just to prune them back and restart them every year, every couple of years at least, because it keeps them tidy, keeps them neat, and also helps the plant as well because they do grow woody and lanky and unsightly. So thanks so much for watching, everyone, and for lots more tips and tricks on how you can grow for and care many different types of cacti and succulents, including propagation, then do check out the many videos on my YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe. Do click that notification bell. You can also follow me on Instagram, Twitter and Facebook at Desert Plants of Avalon. And do check out the many growing articles on my website, desertplantsofavalon.com. And before you go, do leave a comment in the video comments down below, even if it's a heart or smiley face, because every comment really helps the algorithm. I want to wish you all a fantastic plant-powered day.